Hey folks, thanks for tuning in for another video. Today I'm looking at the Kershaw Piston. This is model number 1860. These are widely available as of the recording of this video for about $60 US. You can find them online or possibly at your local knife shop. And it seems to be a pretty popular model. I think not just myself, but a lot of people seem to really appreciate and enjoy the design. This one was made in the United States, right here in the US of A. And as far as variations, there is an aluminum handled model that's coming out. So this one is G10, but there will be an aluminum handled model coming out pretty soon, or at least tentatively, Kershaw is saying. So expect that one in the future. Other than the handle material, the design should be more or less identical and performance should be the same. I've had this one for a few months and I've put it through its paces, at least for my usual EDC type tasks, and I can say that I've been really happy with how it performs. Blade length is 3.5 inches, overall length is 8.5 inches, and when closed you're looking at 5 inches. So I would say this falls in the medium to medium large folding knife category. Weight is 4 ounces, a very respectable 4 ounces, not too heavy. I would say not too light, but I think as far as any knife goes, as long as it's built well, you can't ever have a knife that's too light. Blade steel is Sandvik 14C28N. I've had no rust or corrosion issues whatsoever. Blade thickness is 3 millimeters. You can see right there we've got a lovely little drop point blade shape. Now the blade grind is a flat grind, so it's a really high flat grind. It's almost encroaching into full flat grind territory. So you kind of get the benefits of both worlds. You get this nice thick chunk at the back of the blade with this really cool swedge. If I hold it just right, can you see how it kind of narrows and then thickens towards the tip for a little bit of extra strength towards the tip there. Really cool design, and I love how it's almost that full flat grind. So like I said, you kind of get that really great look of a full flat grind, but you still get a little extra blade strength behind it. So that's pretty cool, and I think it's really attractive. The factory edge was extremely sharp, which has been my experience with pretty much any Kershaw I've ever purchased that I got with the factory edge. And the edge bevel symmetry is pretty darn good on this one. A little bit uneven from one side to the other, but nothing to complain about. I'm real happy with that. Handle material, as I mentioned, is G10, and this is constructed with Torx screws, which is pretty typical on Kershaw's folding knives. It has a T8 Torx screw at the pivot, and you've got some T6 body and clip screws. So that should be, if you've got your Torx driver on hand, you should be able to open and close this pretty easily if you ever need to take it apart and clean it or replace the torsion bar that's in there. It is not skeletonized, but we have no liners. There's a bit of a half liner on the lock side, as you can see there, but that's it, and that is kind of what lends itself to a really light design on the piston, and I really like that. So no liners, also similar to some of Cold Steel's offerings, like the American Lawman and I believe the Recon. Just pure G10 from one side to the other than, like I mentioned, that little liner lock. And that also kind of doubles as the assisted opener cover. So hiding under there is a little torsion bar, as this is a spring-assisted knife. You've got a little 3/4 of the way back spacer back here, so it's open, obviously, for the flipper, which you can see there. There's a little opening to let that through. But other than that, it's pretty much a closed back design, so you're going to want to spray that out or fold over your paper towel with some 409 and kind of swab in there in order to clean it. And we do have some texturing on the handle. This is a light, probably a medium peel ply G10, so it's got some decent texturing to it, very similar to the G10 on the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. In fact, it's probably the identical material. And then there's these cool little fins or waves that are sort of milled through it. Now normally I wouldn't like those little wave shapes on there, but because this is a black knife, and you know there's so many black handled G10 knives out there, it gets kind of boring. And so I thought this was kind of a smart idea from Kershaw to put a little bit more flair, a little bit more, you know, visual appeal in the design by doing that rather than just going straight black G10. I kind of would have liked to have seen it both ways, but I'll take this over plain G10 because, as I said, since it isn't going to be in a different color, I think that adds a nice little pop to the handle, and that's kind of cool. No jimping. There is none in the finger choil here and behind the blade guard, and there is also none at the back of the spine. That is my preference, and that was one of my favorite things about this. You might be able to call this little back spacer, that little railing, or you know, those little grooves, you might be able to call that jimping, but there's not really any grip to it as it is recessed and flush with the handle. So no jimping. So that might bug some of you, but trust me when I say that grip is still really good on this knife, and because you do have that flipper on the blade that doubles as a finger guard, your fingers aren't really going to be sliding up onto the cutting edge, so you'll still be safe. Very comfortable. I'm really happy with the comfort on this knife, actually. It's a very angular design. Let me set it down for a second and kind of let you see the profile there. You can kind of see back here we've got a few little angles, little peaks, and that might make it seem like it's not very ergonomic, but in my hand, at least, it's extremely comfortable, and I don't find there to be any little hot spots or points of irritation. The only thing that I will mention as far as irritation or discomfort is that the flipper, because of the tension on the assisted opening function, because of that spring, in order to overcome that, you do kind of have to dig that flipper into your finger a little bit. And if you're one of those folks that likes to sit around playing with your flipper knives and flicking them open over and over, that's probably going to take its toll on your digit after a while. But for, you know, just regular everyday use, opening the knife several times a day, you're not going to run into any problems. Another little comfort issue that I'll mention is the thumb studs that are on here are a little bit peaked and pointy at one end, and they can kind of scratch and grab in your pocket every once in a while. At least they did with mine. We do have a lanyard hole, and you might be wondering, where the heck is it? It's actually a post, and it's hidden in the back of the handle. Now this is really slick, but it does have a downside. I think this is wonderful. I think that it's really cool that it's hidden away in there, so that if you don't ever use a lanyard hole, you still get that sleek, non-lanyard hole appearance. But the problem is that because it's sort of recessed down in there, and this is some non-gutted paracord, you're going to have a bit of a time actually getting it to go from one side of the post around to the other. And I tried, I did get it to finally go through. I tried it with a few different tools. I had to kind of push it down in there and then pull it up from the other side. But if you just think you're just going to grab your paracord and just feed it right through, it ain't happening. It's going to get bound up in there. So keep that in mind for all you lanyard and knife fob lovers out there. You're going to have to do a little bit of extra work to get that through. Unless you're using some sort of smaller material, maybe a nice little piece of stiff leather would probably flip right through there, but it's got to be a little bit smaller than your average non-gutted 550 paracord. So that was just one small little thing that I noticed, but I do overall like that it's hidden in the handle so that I don't have that lanyard hole in there, as I typically don't put lanyards on my knives. We do have a pocket clip, of course. I really like the size of it and the look. Some Kershaws, especially from the older Ken Onion series, have these really fantastic, ginormous sort of bat wing action going on, and Kershaw doesn't always have, in my opinion, the most attractive pocket clips, but I think this one's really understated. It's very small. It's kind of short for the length of the knife, but it works beautifully, and it has some great tension on it, so it's really going to hold it in your pocket quite well. And it is four-way positionable, so you've got tip up and tip down, and you've got both left and right hand carry, so everybody can be happy and find some way to carry it in their pocket that they're going to like. Pocket comfort, like I mentioned before, other than the thumb studs sticking out a little bit, is quite good. The flipper can sometimes get a little bit in the way in your pocket, but I think anybody who's used to carrying a lot of flipper knives will notice that that just happens with some models. This one isn't any worse than any others, but it's just something to keep in mind. Overall balance is excellent. It's a little bit blade heavy, but it's not annoyingly so, but it does tend to kind of want to lean forward. But I don't know why you would just loosely hold the knife in your hand and allow it to fall onto the ground anyway. But there you go. Opening mechanism is two options. You've got your flipper at the back, and you've got your dual thumb studs. That's right there on the left and right hand side. Almost an ambidextrous knife if you ignore that right-handed liner lock, or what I consider to be a right-handed liner lock. Blade centering is excellent, and I love this little blade channel. You get it to focus in here. I'm being kind of speedy and clumsy today. I like that it's flared. It starts out kind of narrow, and then as it reaches the base of the handle there, you can see that it kind of flares out, spreads out on the sides. Isn't that neat? Well, I think so. I think it's cool. Anyway, really centered. Not a big deal, but it's not rubbing either of the sides of the handle, and with a liner lock or a frame lock, that can sometimes be an issue. So no problems there. I just really love that blade channel. I think that the design of the piston is just really super cool. The lock, as I have mentioned several times, is a liner lock. There is no safety on this assisted open knife, so if you push that flipper open, there's nothing holding it back from jumping open on you. There's the lockup, for those of you interested. There is no lockup or wobble play. There's no handle play. The blade is rock solid in any direction, and has been with lots of use over the last few months, so that's really cool. Rattling parts, yes. The torsion bar will rattle when the knife is open. Let me see if I can get you to hear this. Can you hear that little ticking sound? So because there is that little spring, once the knife is fully engaged, that little spring is a little bit loose. So if you have a tendency to hold your knife and then shake it like crazy, and you want to sneak up on someone or something, that might be a problem. For the rest of you, not a big deal, just a little minor annoyance for people that are really OCD about stuff like that. Overall strength is excellent. I have every confidence in the overall design, the lock, the blade, everything. I really like this knife. Fit and finish is very good, and it's just an overall really great knife. Let me break down my pros and cons real quick. We'll do some comparisons and then we'll kill this video. Excellent, handsome design. It feels very light and slim, super well built, very solid construction. It's very comfortable to use. It's got an excellent and useful blade shape, and it's got a really strong tip that we talked about with that swedge that widens out. I think that is so cool. I think that Kershaw's really absolutely got just a beautiful home run of a design with this knife. And I hope to see this knife become popular and continue on in the coming years. It's really fast to open with that assisted open function. Lockup is quite good, and again, I'm very confident that it's going to stay locked up well. That flipper also acts as a blade guard, which is nice, and I love the hidden lanyard post, as I don't normally use lanyards, but again, a little bit difficult to get that 550 through there. And I do love the clip on here. You know, we're only showing about a ½ inch of the knife sticking out of your pocket, and it's very subdued. It doesn't draw attention to itself, other than the fact that, you know, the clip's a little bit shiny. Just a hint, but no big deal. And I almost forgot to mention that blade is a beautiful fine stone wash, which is not super common on a lot of Kershaw knives. A lot of times they like to use that bead blast, which I don't care for as much. And the stone wash on here is just really pretty. Super, super nice. So, my downsides. As always, I'm not a huge fan of assisted openers, and I would like to see a manual version of this. And heartbreakingly, this knife cannot be, without some decent modifications, this knife cannot be de-assisted, as they say. So you can't just pull the spring out and use it, because the assisted open function, that torsion bar, is what actually holds the knife in the handle. So you take away that spring and there's nothing holding the knife in. So that's a shame. I wish that they would build a detent in here so that those of us who don't care for the spring could take it out. If they took that spring assisted function out of here, and if they were to remove that flipper, this knife would probably rocket into my favorite knives of all time. I do love this knife, and I will carry it often over the next several years, but in order for it to reach that arbitrarily coveted position of probably my top 3, 4, or 5 knives, the flipper would have to go, and it would have to be a manual opening knife. But, you know, can't win them all. The flipper is kind of sharp and pointy, protrudes a little bit out the back, might get caught in your pocket, and like I said, defeating the assisted open function. If you're someone to sit there and play with your knife a whole bunch, that's probably going to become a little bit of an irritation, as it does take quite a bit of pressure to get rid of that, to overcome that little spring. I do like that this also opens with the thumb studs quite easily. The thumb studs work so well, like I was saying, I just wish that flipper was gone. Just let me use the thumb studs and get rid of the assisted open. Kershaw. Anyway, the smooth portions on the handle feel sort of like a little bit of a detriment to the grip. It doesn't bother me, but I do want to mention it just in case anyone is really worried about that type of thing, that because it is a little bit smoothed down in those grooves, you do sort of lose a little bit of traction, especially on closure. And that's probably my one final complaint, if you want to call them that, of the piston, is that sometimes when you go to disengage the liner lock and close it, see what's happening there? See how the handle's kind of slipping in my hand? If you go to close this quickly, sometimes if you don't have just a really good grip on the handle, it'll actually slip in your hand, which can be kind of dangerous. You might even drop the knife. I've fumbled with it a couple times. You want to make sure that your fingers and your thumb have a good grip on the handle as you go to close it, so that it doesn't push down in your hand and fall out of your grip. But not that big of a deal, and I didn't run into it too many times. Let's get zoomed in on her again. There we go. So do I recommend overall? Absolutely. Really cool knife, and with a few tweaks it could have been an absolute, you know, out of the ballpark home run. But I think for most people, if you're looking for a knife in this price range, again around 60 bucks in the medium to large category, if you like assisted openers and you like flippers, there is absolutely no reason not to purchase a Kershaw Piston. You will love this knife. So in that category, highly recommended, excellent value. The only other thing I wish is that it came in blue. Wouldn't that be cool? Bright blue G10 on there. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on to the comparisons. Some quick size comparisons, and then that'll be it for this one. Here is the blue, speaking of blue, Kershaw Skyline, which also has a very fine stonewash finish on it. See, it's quite a bit bigger than that, and I think that Skyline's pretty common. You see a lot of videos of that, so if you've seen that in hand or if you own one, that should give you a good idea of how that's going to stack up. And another knife that I kind of think is in the same category as far as size and comfort is the Spyderco Endura. A little bit longer of a blade, handles pretty similar, but fills about the same role. And I'd say that, you know, this knife typically, it's going to be an EDC knife. It's going to be something you're going to carry around and use for general utility tasks. So there's those two together. How about the Rat Model 1? I've been carrying this at work. This is just a brilliant knife, and I can't believe I didn't get one sooner. And I will have a review on that one very soon. I know some of you are looking forward to that. See those two together. Blade shape, or excuse me, well, yeah, blade shape, but the blade size very similar, similar handles. The Rat 1 being quite a bit heavier by my, estimation, but other than that, those perform very similarly. You can see how much shorter that clip is on the piston compared to your average knife of this length when compared to the Rat 1. And let's bring just a couple more in here. Here is the Cold Steel. Ooh, my hands are slippery this morning. Cold Steel American Lawman, which also has a hidden stonewash finish. You gotta scratch or scrape all that ugly black coating. Okay, ugly in my opinion, black coating off the blade, and then you get there. There's those two side by side. Interestingly, the American Lawman also has a very short clip, although the blade and handle is a little bit shorter in length than the piston. And then finally, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, which has a shorter blade, but not by much, but a very similar sized handle. And I put these two really into the same category. Like I said, of Kershaw, in my opinion, for a lot of folks, these two might just be straight up on par with one another. But in my opinion, if it was a manual opener, I think that these two would be really similarly classed. And the comfort's pretty much the same. The handle size is about the same. They're really close to one another in build. I would probably say the Spyderco wins out a little bit in blade steel and overall fit and finish. But ultimately, I mean, look at the thickness of the handles there, real similar. Just the overall vibe is a lot the same, other than Spyderco's always got that round opening hole, which really drastically differentiates their knives from their competitors. But other than that, these two are really similarly classed. So if you want like sort of a Kershaw Paramilitary 2 that you don't mind as a flipper and assisted open, you will find that in the piston. So there you have it, a few comparisons, long review like always, but I hope you enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you coming along with me for the ride, checking out this knife. Again, highly recommended, run you about 60 bucks. If this looks like it's the knife for you, get one, check it out. I think you're really gonna like it. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.